Mr. Speaker, one of the greatest privileges of my lifetime was to represent the soldiers and families of Fort Hood for 14 years in the U.S. Congress. And on behalf of all Americans, we rise today to express our deepest respect and heartfelt sorrow to the soldiers and families of Fort Hood. These great Americans who've sacrificed so much in service to country now face a tragedy that one day ago would have seemed unimaginable. In the hours, days, and months ahead, I hope the Fort Hood family knows that the thoughts and prayers of the American family are with them. It is a tragedy beyond words that young Americans who were willing to risk their lives for our country in combat abroad ended up losing their lives here at home. While these soldiers did not die in combat, they surely gave their lives in service to country. And for that, we will always consider them as heroes. The spouses, children, and families of the fallen may not have worn our nation's uniform, but they have served our nation through their deep personal sacrifice. Let us be clear today. We will never, ever forget that sacrifice. We cannot bring back their loved ones, but I hope they will forever feel the collective love, gratitude, and prayers of millions of their fellow Americans. To the wounded and their loved ones, our nation's fervent hopes and prayers are with you in these difficult moments. Please know that you are not alone. Mr. Speaker, in the days ahead, Fort Hood will become known to the world as a place of unspeakable tragedy. But I know it is a place of great triumph, a place where service to country isn't an ideal, it is a way of life, a place where the American spirit is alive and well, even amidst this tragedy. I hope the world will see the Fort Hood I saw as its representative. When I think of Fort Hood, I think of the 29-year-old Army widow who asked me not long after her husband's death in Iraq, not how I could help her, but rather how she could help others who had lost their loved ones in combat. When I think of Fort Hood, I think of the young soldier I met at a welcome home ceremony. It was just 3 days before my wife gave birth to our first child. And when I saw him with his wife and his newborn baby, I told him how excited I was at the thought of becoming a father and being there when our son came into the world. Without complaint, he looked at me and said, "Sir, I missed the birth of my first child because I was in Iraq, and I missed the birth of my second child while I was deployed to Bosnia." When I think of Fort Hood, I think of the parents I met there this summer who lost their 2 sons in combat in Iraq just 9 days apart. How can a nation measure the depth of that kind of sacrifice? When I think of Fort Hood, I think of soldiers, families, and their neighbors and nearby communities who care for each other and are proud to serve, and yes, even sacrifice for our nation's freedom. Fort Hood is known as the Great Place. That's what they call it. That's what it is. Past, present, and future. And the actions of one deranged person should not and will not change that fact. With the support and prayers of the American family, Fort Hood will recover from this terrible tragedy. The servicemen and women of Fort Hood, their families, and the neighboring communities are a very special and unique family. They make Fort Hood what it is, a shining star in our nation's defense, a star that will burn brightly for many years to come. From this tragedy, just days before Veterans Day, I pray that Americans will be reminded how blessed we are to live in a land where a special few, our servicemen and women and their families, are willing to give up so much for country. Let us all rededicate ourselves to honoring our troops, our veterans, and their families. Let us remember them not just on Veterans Day and Memorial Day or on a day of tragedy, but every day. As we ask God's blessings on those whose lives we honor with this resolution, let us remember that we are the land of the free because we are still the home of the brave. I reserve the